Welcome to the session Facta non-verba, how cities and regions can deliver the EU Green Deal for climate neutral future. Well, as a loose translation, you probably know this already, Facta non-verba means action, not words, which seems to be quite a key phrase for this COP. So I am Mark Hidson, the Deputy Regional Director at ICLE European Secretariat, and ICLE is a local government global network supporting cities and regions and implementing sustainable development. I have the pleasure to, moderate the session and facilitate the session. So today's session has been developed by a number of key organizations that are working at the heart of how cities and regions can deliver the EU Green Deal. This includes the European Commission's Directorate General for the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, the European Committee of the Regions, Region Centre-Val de Loire, Conference of the Peripheral Maritime Regions. We have the City of Larteh, City of Aarhus and City of Mannheim, and Eurocities, and of course myself from ICLE, who have developed this and in partnership. So to find out more about what those organizations are doing, we don't have time to go into the details now, but we'll be hearing, of course, from the speakers and panelists, but we will post some links in the chat where you'll be directed to further information about what they're doing. I recommend that you look into these links to find out more information after the session. So the objective of today's session is, of course, to introduce the concept of delivering the European Green Deal at the local level, explain why we need local Green Deals, but also outline how local Green Deals can support the green recovery and just transition. Discuss how the European Green Deal can be implemented with local stakeholders such as businesses and citizens across Europe. So high expectations about the European Green Deal being implemented locally. And we'll hear about how that is being done from the speakers. So the next slide, please. Oh, you have that already. So we have today a number of prominent panelists who are working to bring the European Green Deal really closer to the work of cities and regions, whether that's directly working within the cities or developing policies and initiatives to help cities and regions implement the European Green Deal. So the speakers we have today, we have Valentina Zaperti, the Director for Tourism and Proximity from the European Commission's Directorate General for the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. We have Charles Fournier, Vice President of Centre-Val de Loire. We have Richard Shuland, Vice President in charge of Climate and Energy and Vice President, Chair of the Board of the Regional Council of Austro-Bithynia and the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions. We have Mayor Pekka Timonen from the City of Lahti, Christian Specht, First Deputy Mayor, City of Mannheim, and Niels Hulberg, who is the Chief Executive Officer from the City of Aarhus. So as you can see, some prominent speakers and panelists. So I'd like to ask the audience to post comments about what you hear and your experience with the European Green Deal and implementing it at the local level. Questions as well on what you've heard. And I'll try and pick some of these up through the chat and the live discussions. And then as we go along, I'll put these to the panelists if we have time, or at least read them out if they're comments. So I'd like to remind the speakers, of course, to try and stick to the time so we can have some discussion, of course, to allow all the panelists today to speak. But first of all, I think to help set the scene, I hope that most of you who are participating know the European Green Deal at least. But to give us some policy background and set the scene, I'd like to introduce Valentina Zaperti to take the virtual platform, as it were, or take the virtual screen.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for this invitation. And I'm here also because I believe that today's discussion is important. So that's my first point. And why? Because actually cities represent almost 3/4 of humanity's emission. And this data in itself shows quite clearly that to meet the carbon neutrality objective by 2050, we need to make rapid changes in the way we live, in the way we work, and in the way we move in cities. And making the link with the title of this session, I think that we need to shift the gear from words to facts, indeed. So we need to unlock as rapid as possible action in cities for decarbonization and resilience, and at the same time support the so-called proximity economy actors, which is equally important. As you may know, the Union, Europe, so to speak, has already stepped up ambition quite considerably in the field of the Green Deal, and we have taken a number of initiatives. To briefly mention, Fit for 55 package, the Next Generation EU also, investment and the recovery package, the European taxonomy to foster the right investments, but also the industrial strategy, where we have identified 14 industrial ecosystems, 14 which are meant to be the most important industries in Europe. And one of the 14 is precisely the proximity and social economy ecosystem. Within that context, we are now starting what I hope will be an interesting type of work, which is meant to co-create. So we want to co-create together with businesses, but also public authorities, but also the local stakeholders within the proximity and social economy ecosystem, a plan. So we want to develop together a plan with concrete actions for delivering on the twin. Actually, it's a twin transition because it's sustainability, but it's also digitalization towards 2030, but then beyond to go to 2050. And cities and communities and local economic actors are key levers in this process. So my message here is also that without you, we will not go very far. So we badly need you. And I want to say that the policy choices that local governments make today will determine the successful transition to a greener, cleaner, and smarter way of living. But at the same time, I hope you will also be offering new opportunities, economic including opportunities for the local stakeholders, so to speak, the local people. So it is within this broader context that we have launched the Intelligent Cities Challenge Initiative. As you know, it brings together 136 cities from 21 different countries. And we thought that this initiative could be useful to provide cities in particular with a clear direction, hopefully clear and hopefully a direction, on a local development that is sustainable, both from the environment point of view, but also from the social point of view. And thanks to you, thanks to the many cities involved in the local communities, there are local green deals that are being developed, which will greatly help to reach our broader objectives. Now, very briefly, let me just outline a couple of points. First, we are co-developing within the Intelligent Cities Initiative a blueprint for local green deals, precisely together with you, with the ICLI, and we discussed this with the EU mayors during the ICC, so the Intelligent Cities Initiative Mayor Summit, and this triggered, I think, and I hope, a strong momentum and commitments. And now we are with over 30 cities which either have developed or are in the process of developing these local green deals. My second point is that cities are crucial also in, so you are also important, you know that, but of course we also know that you are important in shaping the built and urban environment and the places we live in and we work. And in that context, we are working on a renovation wave and an affordable housing initiative. We can discuss that further if we have time. And perhaps my last but not least point, this is, by the way, a cross-cutting thing I see across industries and ecosystem, but it's fundamental. It's the people and the skills. So in order to, to achieve this transformation, we need the skills, we need the right skills, and we need a major reskilling effort, and we believe that you can really help us in going through this necessary transition. So I think I will stop here. So the message basically is that we know what is the objective, the ambition, and I think that without the cities, it will be hardly possible to make it, and hence we need to work together in the next months and years in order to make tangible progress through concrete actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina. So I think it's quite clear that then with the initiatives that you've mentioned, the strategies, the policy, the financing packages, that the framework is in place. I think there's a clear action plan then to go forward with this. Valentina mentioned there the Intelligent Cities Challenge. The link should be put in the chat if it hasn't already, so you can find out further information about that, in particular the blueprint that Valentina mentioned, which is looking at supporting cities to implement a local Green Deal. Valentina, the proximity economy, am I right in saying, because you mentioned this a couple of times, that's looking at job creation, resources, synergies between organizations at the city, the regional level. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a quite actually diversified notion. However, I think that fair to say that it's a notion that looks at local, at local, more local, then it can be cities, it can be regions, but it's about, going local value chains and find the ways of, getting the right interactions and the right synergies. And it's also about, I think, even more here than in other ecosystem, about strengthening citizens' engagement, and it's about improving in the end the citizens' lives because of this very close to territory dimension.
Yeah, which I think is absolutely essential for cities and regions. I think this is really hits the spot, I think, of what cities and regions want to do as well. So, all right, thank you, Valentina. As I say, do stay with us. We may come back with more comments, questions if they come through. So I'd like to move on then to the panelists. We have two panelists initially to come from the regional perspective. The first is Charles Fournier, who's a vice president of the Centre Val de Loire. So, Charles, today we have a lot of cities around the table that we just heard, looking at local green deals as well. But as vice president of the regional authority, could you tell us how can a region really start actions to achieve a climate transition? And then do you involve cities and territories? Well, how do you involve cities and territories in the climate transition?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet you. My apologies in advance for my basic English. I will try to read it clearly so that you can fully understand. I hope so. As a French region, we have to realize some regional plans in matters of territory development, economy, energy, biodiversity, etc. Since 2015, we have to adopt a regional plan of sustainable development and balance of territories that have to be conformed with European and French objectives. They are in fact pretty ambitious, considering we actually start from in our region, but in fact everywhere on the planet. I think we can all agree with this. Our region considers that the matter today is not so much to redefine objectives, but how to reach them and get everybody on board. We think that we have today a tremendous collective responsibility to act to embody the transition in the territories. In 2019, our region decided to organize a regional COP, as it is done on a worldwide, to mobilize stakeholders out of our region, but above all else to encourage action to be taken and achieve the objectives across our territory. We launched a regional process with a real paradigm shift. It is not a punctual event, but a collective process, including all the stakeholders, with an agreement of all parties each 2 years. It involves all stakeholders, citizens, associations, companies, public players, local authorities, banks, in a general mobilization that turns everyone to action from transition. It's also a popular education tool. The baseline of this COP is COP of Action on Social Justice, putting people at the heart of climate action. It aims to enable citizens and public and private organizations to be part of thematic coalitions and encourage all stakeholders. To take and implement undertakings which will enable the achievement of the region energy and climate targets, and also support either financially or technically projects of any size to maximize the effect. To do so, we implement 4 main pillars within this COP. The coalitions, we are grouped composed of public and private entities working together on specific subjects. The cooperator, which are a kind of COP ambassadors that are 315 today. The scientific committee, composed of 25 experts, and the citizens committee, which provides recommendation on the COP implementation and targets. To conclude, after more than 2 years of implementation, concrete results have emerged from this regional COP. As example, new common rules for renewable energy, creation of a saving account for citizens with a bank to support COP projects, an ecological transition accelerator for companies, a participatory budget for the climate in high schools, or original project, cultural project, so that culture help us build and dream a new vision of the world. According to your question about involving cities, in June 2020, our region became a coordinator of the Covenant of Mayors. I am convinced by the importance of linking all the territorial levels. We consider this COP as a very interesting tool to develop local Green Deal territories, as we inspire ourselves from other local Green Deal dynamics. We are, of course, awaiting the conclusions of the 26th COP, but the European territories will also have to raise their ambitions and cooperate, not only to act, but also to exert pressure on the states if they do not do so. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. That's it's a very interesting idea about having sort of the local COP idea. I mean, this is then the approach of a local Green Deal. You're bringing the different stakeholders together. It's a very good idea. It's something we should look into to see whether that can be replicated. Also, you're mentioning sort of, which I think is probably going to be a theme of this session, involving the different stakeholders and citizens. I think we're probably going to hear this quite a lot. and the financing. But I'll take the next panelist and region and see if some of the questions come as we're talking and come back to them. So let me remind participants, please do post comments, questions about what you're hearing, and I'll try and pick them up. But the next panelist and Vice President Richard Shuland. We could, I'm sure whether you can put your camera on so that we can see.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Would be
sorry,
great.
I thought I put it on, but.
No, that's great. We can, we saw you for a second and then, yeah, we've got you now. That's great.
Okay, fine.
So, yeah, this is, Richard, it's great to have you here. I mean, we've seen the role of regions and coordinators to foster and support climate action. I understand this is also something that we can also find in the CPMR, the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions Act, which shows regions' contribution to the Green Deal. So I understand that you have then a CPMR Regions Act initiative, which is looking at this. Can you tell us a bit more about that, what it is, and then how it sort of fits in with the local Green Deal?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Hibson, and I will soon straight away get to the Regions Act. But first of all, a very good afternoon to all of you. Usually taking part in online events, meetings. It's from my home in Jakobstad, in Ostrobotnia, or even more often from my summer house on the Ostrobotnian coast, which is the west coast of Finland, some 450 kilometers away from the capital, Helsinki. Well, indeed, the Regions Act is an initiative launched by the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions to show the contribution of regions, of its member regions, to the Green Deal. And it's easy to get acquainted with this Regions Act initiative and what it has produced. There's an interactive map to be found on the CPMR website. It is based on the input of around 40 regions, and it covers different areas such as mitigation, adaptation, EU funds, and just transition. It doesn't only show the contribution of regions to climate action, but it is also a tool for us to share best practices. Regions Act clearly shows that CPMR regions mean business when it comes to climate action. Almost 40% of the regions aim to become climate neutral way before 2050. Just to give you an example, my own region, Ostrobotnia, has set the objective to become climate neutral by 2035. However, Regions Act is not just about percentages and ambition. It shows with concrete examples the action that we, the regions, are implementing on the ground to deliver the Green Deal. Many examples of measures have been collected in different areas, such as transport, energy, or innovation. It also shows the integrated approach that regions are implementing when it comes to climate action. And we shouldn't forget that regions have competences in several key areas for the ecological transition, in both mitigation and adaptation. I would also like to echo Vice President Fournier on the important role that regions have as coordinators between local actors in their territories. We have collected several examples on how regions are involving local authorities, the scientific community, but also the youth and companies to shape their policies, and therefore ensure that they are anchored to territories, to their strengths, and that they reply to their needs. In this respect, smart specialization strategies are a great example. I believe we all agree today that a place-based approach that is tailored to the needs and strengths of regions and cities is critical to ensure the transition to climate neutrality. No region is the same. There is a great variety. Neither the problems they are facing nor the solutions. This job is to be place-based. In Regions Act, regions have identified the sectors most in need of support the regions most in need of support to reach climate neutrality. The variety of sectors mentioned by CPMA members needing support shows that the concept of just transition is inherently place-based and region-specific. The initiative also shows that key role that cohesion policy funds had in supporting climate action in the 2014 to 2020 period. European funds delivered with local regional authorities and indeed of vital importance to the EU climate ambition. And the key principles of partnership and multi-level governance must be preserved. Let me conclude by coming back on the important role that regions have. They can make sure that not only major urban centers, cities, but also rural and peripheral areas are part of the transition. And they must, of course, be part of the transition. This is something extremely important, as no territory should be left behind. It is in the region's DNAs and mission to make sure that the ecological transition happens in all our territories, that every single territory can contribute, be part of, and benefit from the ecological transition. Thank you for your attention. Speaking to you from Glasgow, spent half a day at the COP26 event area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I think it's certainly right that the regions are quite central to the work of bringing the European Green Deal down to the local level. And just when I say local Green Deal, that's essentially what I mean, just for the audience, that bringing a local Green Deal is bringing and implementing the European Green Deal at the local level. We've got a couple of minutes actually, so a follow-up question. It would be good to hear maybe just a practical example from both of you, Vice President Shuland and Vice President Fournier. Can you give in 1 or 2 minutes each just a practical example about how it's working, particularly this Regions Act that you just mentioned? Richard, maybe you go first, and then we can go to you then, Charles.
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you. I'll try. Well, I believe I could mention the Ostrobothnia Smart Specialization Strategy as a great example to share. Our region was the first Finnish region to adopt a Smart Specialization Strategy back in 2012. We consider innovation to be one of the main drivers to deliver the Green Deal, and the green transition must go hand in hand with competitiveness and jobs. And can say that smart specialization has played an important role in the development of clusters, but also by shaping our last innovation strategy. One example I can give is that of Vasa Energy Cluster, which is the largest energy technology hub in the Nordic countries, bringing together more than 160 companies and with an 80% export rate. Its success relies on the approach fostered by smart specialization, and that is bringing together companies, public authorities, and universities in order to identify bottlenecks and gaps, but also to find solutions that are anchored to the strengths and know-how of the local actors. Again, it's a question of being place-based and to ensure that skills are matched. And now we have recently the Greta. It has not actually anything to do directly with Greta Thunberg, but it comes in very convenient. It's the Greta, the Green Transition Project. It works to extend the positive experience of using this smart specialization strategy and its tools to the circular economy sector. And it's a fundamental tool to a region for its capacity to deliver the Green Deal. It is evidence-based and place-based. I'm repeating myself, but it's an important criterion here, and ensuring that solutions are found in and within the territories which we are speaking of. If time allows, I would also like to quickly mention the Aurora Bothnia Ropax ferry, which connects Vasa in Ostrobothnia with Umeå, which is really a neighboring city in Västerbotten on the other side of the Kvarken. Sea Strait in Sweden, supported by Ostrobothnia and other Finnish and Swedish regions. It has recently, this Ropex ferry started its operations, and it's considered right now to be one of the most environmentally friendly ferries in the world, if not at the moment the most environmentally friendly ferry, by combining liquefied natural gas and electric power. We know that liquefied natural gas is not the ultimate solution, of course. Thank you.
Right, and some good examples from there. That's certainly worth looking into, I think, for the participants after this session. Charles, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, Charles, but if there's any sort of example you think from the regional perspective that you're aware of.
Okay, I can try. An example, we organize a collation about the wood resource, and organize and again, implement of SCATE orders to preserve the resource in our region. It's a concrete action in our region. We create a climate data hub to govern pilot the transition. Our example, we create a climate assembly on the region of with all stakeholders, and it's opportunity to govern the transition collectively. Oh, it's difficult for me in English. we modify the mobilities in our region on govern proper mobility. Sorry, I can explain more. But we are 300 engagement in undertaking 315 undertaking of companies, of collectivities, of association, and so we some months we can evaluate all these undertakings.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. Well, it's good to hear about sort of the approach that you're taking as an action. It's not just a strategy, it's actually a day-to-day approach, and it's good to hear about concrete activities from Richard as well there. So things are happening on the ground. As I say at the start, it's about action now. Strategies are one thing, it's about approaches for implementation, but it's also actually about implementation. So it's good to hear. So I'd like to move on to our next panelists. So this is really implementing the European Green Deal at the local level. And this is a first Deputy Mayor Christian Specht from the city of Mannheim. We work closely, as do a number of the partners of this session, with the city of Mannheim. We're really doing quite a lot on the ground. So it would be really good to hear from you, First Deputy Mayor Christian Specht. And why is Mannheim adopting then a local Green Deal? And what does it mean in practice then for a city? You've got some experience here, so it'd be good to hear.
Yes, thanks, Mark, and good afternoon to everybody. You see greetings from Mannheim in the back. You see the map of the city. We are about 320,000 inhabitants in southwest of Germany, in the nice valley of the Rhine. And we are really the heart of industry in southwest Germany. So it's a special ambition for us to become climate neutral maybe in 2030. So if you can make it here in Mannheim, you can make it everywhere a little bit. That's our claim, because it's not possible that we lose too many jobs. We have to make a really just transition. So cities like Mannheim, they see themselves as allies of the Commission in achieving sustainable development and climate neutrality. This is also reflected in our political Mannheim message, which we adopted last year, also by the Council, to create a binding commitment, a political binding commitment. We are developing a local Green Deal because we recognize that real action now is needed immediately. We also recognize that the city administration cannot work alone. We need to create a bold and evidence-based vision with stakeholders from across the whole city. So our Green Deal is not simply the implementation of European policy. We see our local Green Deal as a framework for concrete municipal and community action. It is also a recovery and a resilience strategy to help transform our city and local economy towards sustainability and climate neutrality. Within this local framework, we are exploring deals with our citizens, administration, but also especially with companies, the big companies, the chemical industry, for example, but also the small ones, and civil society, as well as local researchers and political leaders. These span all 8 policy areas outlined in the European Green Deal. You know them all: biodiversity, sustainable food systems, sustainable agriculture, clean energy, building and renovating, sustainable mobility, eliminating pollution, and climate action. Every small deal we make in these 8 areas brings us one step closer to our goal of climate neutrality. We are not limited by the commitments made in the European Green Deal. We believe that we can and must go further with our local Green Deal. This is why Mannheim is aiming for climate neutrality by 2030, much earlier than in the EU. This is our first target deal approved by the City Council. As a local Green Deal pilot city, we are developing a new approach to local climate policy, which we hope other cities can learn from. Not only do we want to share our successes, but also we want to share our lessons learned. Action at the local level is needed to address the pressing threat of climate change, and we will be stronger if we work together to find innovative and smart solutions. With our local Green Deal, we need to rethink the way we live and the way the companies work. That is really important to understand and to work with them, maybe shaping new products, new processes, new services through concrete agreements with the whole of civil society. And positive communication is also a key from the beginning. I see finally 3 central ways for this. First, we started to analyze all projects and strategies in our city, more than 150, according to their Green Deal potential. This stock taking is a dynamic process carried out by our city administration, as well as other civil society and private sector actors. In this process, along the EU, federal and state frameworks, we purposefully examine the deal potential, identify gaps in our efforts, and build bridges between the projects already underway. This may not sound innovative at first, but it's very structured and allows us to unlock real potential in our administration and across the city. This approach is new and it's effective. For example, if you think about, we have to decarbonize district heating for 165,000 households within 10 years, totally decarbonize. So you see how difficult and how ambitious this aim is. Secondly, our Green Deal is a community project we heard about from the colleagues already, for which we must succeed in mobilizing the entire city. We don't just draft a plan in the city hall and ask our partners to implement it. We invite stakeholders from across the city to get involved and develop specific local Green Deals together. So this means local green deals in every small enterprise, in the big and small enterprises, and deals with us, with the administration. This is something new, I think, for a very industrial area. These agreements are not vague promises, but concrete commitments with relevant, visible impacts on the 8 fields of action of the European Green Deal. And thirdly, I don't want to forget this because I'm also responsible for finance in my city. The whole process has to be financed. So, and so I want to mention the EU taxonomy will require a local Green Deal, because otherwise we won't get money, and we are not funded by public or private banking if we can prove and show that our investments in our cities are really aim at climate neutrality or are very sustainable. So these are 3 main arguments why we think a local Green Deal in our city is needed, and that's the way we try to go for. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I think there are sort of 3 very clear points on that, and of course it's good to hear from sort of a city coming from sort of the industrial legacy side, which is absolutely essential, I think, for other cities to learn from. So I think this is an important angle to come from. And speaking of the integrated governance, I think that you're outlining there, working with businesses. I'd like then to put that question to Mayor Pekka Timonen from the city of Lahti. You know, why is it important and necessary to involve the business sector and companies? We've heard a little bit from the first Deputy Mayor, Christian Specht, but why is it important from your perspective?
Good afternoon, Mark, from Lahti, Finland. And why it's important is the answer is basically very simple. It cannot be done without them. So we need companies to do the green shift, what we need to do in order to find and reach sustainable urban structures and urban lifestyle. And I want to point out in the beginning that the role of also of small and medium-sized enterprises is vital, because bigger companies and bigger enterprises already are quite far in their strategy processes, and we have seen a very quick shift in Europe and actually globally when big global companies are taking very ambitious sustainable business goals and are really turning their businesses upside down. But the key on a local level and on a city level is also that how we make sure that small and medium-sized enterprises are with us, are doing the change, and also are utilizing and benefiting from the Green Deal and this big shift what we do in Europe. So that's like overall the picture. So here in Lahti, we are same as Mannheim, industrial background. 120,000 people, 200,000 as urban region, 1 hour north from our capital, Helsinki. This year, Lahti is the European Green Capital, nominated by the European Commission. So happy to be the model city of, as to say, this year. And our next goal is that we are carbon neutral already by 2025, and that's almost tomorrow. And based on our latest calculations, done this May, we are on that track. So we are aiming to be one of the first cities everywhere to become carbon neutral by 2025. It's hard work, but we still believe that we can do it. So for us, working in a local level, and it's absolutely right what already been said, that the Green Deal will be implemented, and the critical that action takes place on a local level, on a city level, and on a municipal level. Here in Lahti, where we are involving businesses, we have established a development center for carbon neutral construction and infrastructure. The key question, how we find ways and business opportunities creating a carbon neutral buildings and infrastructure, and also retrofitting the old buildings into sustainable models. Second thing is, of course, circular economy. In Lahti, we have said goodbye to landfills only 1% of our municipal waste is not either reused or recycled. But it's also create growing business opportunities, and approximately 10% of the business turnover in our region is based on circular economy businesses. Then electric mobility. In our city, very rapidly growing business area. For example, we have a company making chargers for electric traffic for international markets, growing very rapidly. So we have approximately 30 companies now joined for the city being one of the initiators to come together to develop all the businesses related on the traffic shift to the electricity. Sports, we are famous for winter sports, and we're hosting World Cup every year. So also in our picture, that's also part of the big picture. Lots of businesses working there, creating sustainable events and sustainable business models. And then finally, but not last but not the least, is health. Right now, in the same building here at the Lahti City Hall, that we are announcing a 10-year program called Lahti Plan, where we put together the health sector and environmental actions and study and learn together with businesses too, how making our city more sustainable improves people's health. There is a lot of talk about it, but very little research and knowledge. So also part of the bigger picture social aspect of the Green Deal and well-being is also in our picture. So to finalize all this, without businesses, without their involvement, without their innovation and their investment in the Green Deal, it will not happen. So back to your original question, that's why we are doing it.
Thank you very much for that. Well, I think two key points I'd like to pick up on there. I think that you mentioned at the end the health, and we've heard just transition as well mentioned a couple of times, that this is key, but of course it's quite difficult, I think, maybe to show, well, what does that mean in practice? But it is essential with the just transition. I mean, I think without addressing social issues as well, you're not going to be able to address the environmental issues. Yeah, and actually interesting for both you and the first Deputy Mayor, Christian Specht, you both mentioned that you're working with businesses closely, and it sounds like it's going well, and it's important to engage them, because sometimes we hear it's difficult to get businesses on board for these types of activities. But I think this has changed. I think there's a lot, particularly at the local level. I think it's maybe easier than at a national level with global corporations, but at the local level, I think it is easier, and they do get on board and are on board and interested to do this together. So I'm come back. Maybe it is one or two questions going to come up. I'm still hoping that the participants are going to comment and post some questions, and I can pick one or two up. But then let's just move to Niels Holberg, from the Chief Executive Officer from the City of Aarhus. A question maybe I've got for you is, what kind of challenges then are cities facing? We've heard quite a lot of the good things that are happening, but what are the challenges facing, particularly in respect to achieving climate neutrality? I mean, we've heard a lot of good stories, but it's a big challenge. I mean, we're hearing this as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting Aarhus to the table this afternoon, and thank you for some very inspirational talks from my colleagues, both from a regional perspective, but also from a city perspective. And I've noticed with great interest that Lahti has the great ambition of being CO2 neutral in 25. Our goal is less ambitious, it's only 30. And we've started out to address the situation in Mannheim with dealing with our central heating. We started way back in 2008 and have now totally converted our central heating system, which covers 90% of our households. And we're about the same size as Mannheim, 300,000 people. And we've actually achieved a total refurbishment of our heating system by using sustainable energy and biofuel, which means that we've actually now halved our CO2 emission. But as you suggest in your question, Mark, it's now the difficult part is approaching, and of course we deal with it in the two strands that you have to deal with it, both in terms of citizen participation and actions in living your life differently. But we also gang up with companies and give them the leading seat, so to speak. We actually have formed a business alliance with 4 major work groups, where we've actually asked the CEOs of companies within different areas to head these work groups and try to work out sustainable solutions from their point of view, together with other companies. I'll just take you through the 4 working groups shortly. First of all, we work with climate-friendly workplaces and employees. And we've asked Arla, who's the multinational dairy farming company, to head that one, together with some of the big workplaces in our city. And that is going very well, and many good ideas that we haven't thought of ourselves as a city have actually come up, and they've taken a great lead in that. Secondly, we are working, of course, with climate neutral logistics. Aarhus is the biggest harbour in Denmark. 2/3 of all containers in and out of Denmark go through Aarhus Harbour. So CO2 neutral logistics is very much on our hearts. And we try to work with the biggest transport companies to find out solutions, both in terms of how to build the infrastructure around the harbour and how to get all the at least some of the containers on board a train, or to have sustainable trucks going to and from the harbour. It's a long-term, innovative action plan, but we are very, very ambitious and hope that we will be bringing some interesting results to the table very shortly. Thirdly, and in that respect, I think we are trailing behind Lahti, is in green mobility, because we of course we also want to have many more hybrid cars and electric cars in the city, but we haven't been able to go as fast as you've seen it in Norway and in Finland. But we have great focus on it, and it's one of the difficult parts. And lastly, we have a working group headed by our university dealing with sustainable procurement in all aspects of what companies can do and what we can do as a city. And the university have taken a great lead in this, and they put all their efforts and knowledge into the processes. And I think that we will be changing the habits and also the markets for sustainable procurement over the coming years. But these are sort of the main issues of what we're trying to do. We have the city council that are very ambitious in doing that, and in great unity have actually put up these plans, and we follow up on them just like we've been doing in a real budget. So if we're not meeting the goals, we have to go back and put up more ambitious goals, because otherwise we won't hit the neutrality zero in 2030.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think actually where you've added a couple of additional points, I think that not been raised there. I think but quite important, as you highlight the supply chains. And I think if that's one thing the pandemic has highlighted, is that supply chains are vulnerable, but it also highlighted the importance of them and the impact that they can have. And there with procurement as well, I mean, using public money to purchase sustainable, including the economic and social aspects of each product and service we buy is also absolutely essential. And that's a practical, maybe quick win mechanism that can be used already, because the system for purchasing is already in place for many regional and local governments. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We've got, so I mean, there's 5 minutes left. So then a follow-up question here then is, well, the type of transition that we're looking at. And you mentioned also here, Niels Holberg, about the fact that it is going to rely on changing maybe sort of a behavior. Now, this is, I think, quite a key question for all of you. So I'm going to put the question to you, but unfortunately you only have about 20 seconds or maybe 10, 15 words to answer. So this, but you're all experienced with probably these types of questions. So the question is, I mean, I think the type of transformation we're looking at, well, in the next 10 years, according to the 6th IPCC report that came out, requires radical change. So as mayors, deputy mayors, leaders of organizations, how how are you going to address radical change? Because this is what's being called for at this COP, I think, isn't it? At the national level, of course, mainly from the COP, but it's actually the cities and regions that are going to have to implement a lot of this. So it's the same question. How is that going to happen? What's your 20, 30 seconds with to achieve radical change? And I'm going to start off back to Valentina, if that's all right. Put you.
That's so kind. Well, if I have 20 seconds, I would be tempted to say hashtag awareness, meaning that I'm after a few months of this discussion, I'm starting to be convinced that, of course, the policy framework is important. Of course, the investments that have to be made are fundamental. This is clear. But at the end of the day, if you do not have everybody on board, including very much the consumers, the end users, this may not be happening. So I think that to achieve a good level of awareness of everybody, including the end user, consumer, be it the tourist. I think of the tourism, for example, is perhaps a key word here.
Yeah, I think they're two good ones. So then I'll move to next to Vice President Charles Fournier.
Okay, for me, we have to organize a coalition of territories. I think if all territories work together on organize a pressure about states, it's a radical practice, and it can be possible to accelerate and to succeed the transition. So it's my idea, and I want to work with all cities on the territories in Europe to organize this coalition. And we need the support of the Commission. Thank you.
Then I'll move to Vice President Richard Shuland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hitson. I'd say keep up the good work that has been started and that is going on. Look at what other regions do, best practices, and keep discussing, informing the citizens, the people of our regions. Keep the process going. Thank you.
And to you, Vice First Deputy Mayor Christian Specht.
Yes, I think cities cannot achieve the climate target alone, so cities need to be accepted as key players and partners in policy making on national and on international level, and also at agenda setting. And secondly, I think the resources need to be made available in order to unlock our potential. So we think about for 100,000 people, you need more or less €1 billion to become climate neutral, and only 20% we are only direct responsible as cities. So we really need to make resources available in our cities.
Yeah, definitely. And the vertical governance you mentioned there, I think, is essential. This is a message I think it's being also sent to the COP by the partners actually of this session about involved cities and regions, because they're the ones having to implement in international, national policy making. Then back to you, Mayor Pekka Timonen, in 30 seconds or so.
I think, first of all, we have to convince and make sure that everybody understands that the sustainable city is a better city. It's not only numbers and facts and figures, but it must be a better city for everyone. Secondly, we, for example, here have tried concrete examples of 1.5 degrees lifestyle. So different key members of society and our community have showed what it demands for them to live a 1.5 degrees lifestyle. And then thirdly, make sure that right now the situation is that the business community talks are ahead of our political talks. I think not only in Finland, but everywhere in Europe, the political debate is lagging behind on what's really happening in other parts of the society. So finally, let's make sure that the political debate gets into the place and gets into the time what we are really talking about. Right now, it's lagging behind.
Your 2025 target is radical. So then just to finish off with Niels Hulberg.
Well, I think our experiences from the last 1.5 years about fighting COVID-19 has really given us new courage that we can change quickly. And I think we should build upon those experiences that we can actually move when we know that we have to. I think that is probably what is going to help Pekka and his colleagues in Finland, that the population is actually ready to change if it's necessary. And the politicians, of course, have to facilitate that.
That's a very good point, I think, to end on. So I'd like to thank all the speaker panelists here today. I think actually you're doing a lot on the ground, which is good to hear. And the idea, I think, of taking this forward and working collectively to share the best practice, to show what can be done, I think is essential, and definitely a next step that maybe the partners of this session and hopefully the organizations who are watching this can take forward. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for participating. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks.